Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. I hope that you are all well. Welcome back, and if you are new, thanks for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am going to be talking about all of the books that I read in January. I read a total of 11 books, and I thought I would do something a little different this year with my wrap-ups. I am going to share the first sentence of each book, and then I will tell you what I thought about the book. The first sentence of the first book I read is, "I am what they call in our village one who has not yet died, a widow 80 years old." This is from Snowflower and the Secret Fan by Lyssa C. I love Lyssa C, and I have read a couple of her other books, and while I enjoyed this book, I didn't enjoy it to the same degree as her others. However, her writing is incredible. This is a story about friendship, and it takes place in the 19th century China. Lily is the main character, and the story begins when Lily is about 6 or 7, and her sisters are starting the foot binding process. Most of the characters are not named. We know them by their relationship to Lily. So there's eldest sister, third sister, elder brother. The foot binding custom and how Lyssa C writes about it was so real. Her descriptions made me squirm. It's amazing how much in the culture rests on feet, like marriage and acceptance. Lily then experiences a couple of losses that shape who she is, and Lyssa C is very good about bringing the culture into the story without doing it in an obvious way. The way the story unfolds, you learn about emotions and obedience and caring for the elderly. What the book really focuses on is what is called a laotong. I think I'm saying that correctly. And this is a friendship or bond between two girls that it lasts a lifetime. So at the age of 7, Lily is matched with a laotong, and her name is Snowflower. This bond is supposed to allow her to take a different route than most women, and it is in some ways seen as more significant than a marriage. A fan becomes a symbol of their friendship, hence the title. The two girls are very different. Lily thinks that Snowflower is more eloquent and more mature in many ways. Her family is more affluent. She considers herself very lucky to have been matched with Snowflower. But like in all relationships, it isn't easy, and the two women go through a lot. In many ways, this is a coming-of-age story as we follow the two girls as they grow up, get married, and have children. There are themes of death and grief, duty, family, respect, love, and the classes and rankings in society and in households. And I enjoy learning about laotong friendships. I hadn't heard of it before, and it's interesting the importance placed on female friendship in a culture where having a girl is basically a disaster, and the expectations of women and value placed on women is dismal. This book would be for anyone who enjoys books about female friendship and about Chinese culture. Next up, the first line is, "I am a frozen statue of a girl in the woods." And this is from Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. And at first, I love this cover. I think it's so striking. This is considered a YA book, and it's a mystery thriller. The main character is 18-year-old Donis Fontaine, who is biracial, and she doesn't fit in her hometown or on the Ojibwe Reserve. She is incredibly smart, especially when it comes to science and chemistry, and her dream is to work in medicine. Donis witnesses a murder, and she goes undercover to help the police and try and solve this murder that seems connected to a meth ring. Throughout the story, Donis is learning more about her own culture and the teachings, and she does some of her own investigating on this case, and she uses her culture and her knowledge of science and medicine in order to solve the case. So the case becomes even more complicated because somehow her uncle is or was involved, and she suspects that maybe her brother is involved too. So there is a race to figure out what is really going on because more girls are being murdered. Plus, there is a romance between Donis and Jamie just joined her brother's hockey team, but things don't really add up with him either. Now, I figured things out there, but there was just a lot about this book. A lot of it I liked. You already know I love a strong female character. That was good, and even the love story worked here for me. I think it would be a good book club pick because there's a lot of thought-provoking material here. But I think for me, there was just a lot going on, and maybe it was trying to do too much. It's not necessarily a bad thing. If you enjoy a love story, mystery, and Indigenous culture, then this would probably be a good book for you. Okay, this third book begins like this. In Prague, we stayed at the Hotel Srtovka in the shadow of the historic Charles Bridge. That is from Indians on Vacation by Thomas King. My book club read this book together, and Thomas King is one of my favorite writers and another Indigenous author. In this story, Mimi and Bird travel from Guelph, Ontario to Prague. Mimi is excited about travel, she has an adventurous spirit, and Bird would rather stay home and doesn't see a point to travel. And the two of them have been traveling to places following postcards that Bird's uncle had sent. So while in Prague, they explore the various tourist attractions like the St. Charles Bridge, the astrological clock, and they even take a day trip to Budapest. Now, I have been to both Prague and Budapest, so I can imagine, where they were in the story, especially when they were in Prague, and that was kind of neat. And I wish I could say that there was, some big climax that happens, or that there's some huge spoilers that I have to keep from you, but there really wasn't. And in fact, the storyline of the uncle's postcards goes absolutely nowhere. And I was a little bit surprised too that the book won the Stephen Leacock Award for humor. And while King does write with a humorous tone in his books, and I love him for it, I didn't find this one as funny. Even the Indigenous themes of immigration, residential schools, they seemed almost dismissive. The biggest theme for me in this book was mental illness and how Mimi has named almost like different characters of Bird's mental illness. And it was an interesting concept and interesting how it was brought into the story. In fact, my book club had quite a conversation around this and some of the characters in the novel, and how one in particular about whether, that person was real or not. So this book didn't live up to the same standards that I've come to expect from Thomas King, but it was a good read. Okay, this next book is huge. And the first line is, "You know that something is coming." And that line is from this beast of a book. See if I can hold it for a long enough time. Go Tell the Bees That I Am Gone by Diana Gabaldon. This is the 9th book in the Outlander series. It's about 1900-ish pages long. This book came out 7 years after the last one, which I think that is the longest time in between books for this series. because it had been so long, I am grateful that there were good reminders of where the last book, which was written in my own heart's blood, where that ended. I can't think of another series that I wait for the next book and that I actually read it when it comes out, like I read it right away. But I also have to say that the series isn't as captivating to me as it was in the first 4 or even 5 books. I felt like not a lot happens. Like, I mean, things happen, but it doesn't move at the same pace as the earlier books, and it's hard to really talk about if you don't know the story of the 8 previous books. So you probably do know that there's time travel, and in this one, Brianna and Roger, their 2 children, have returned to the 1700s. And there is a reason, but if I tell you, then I am spoiling book 8, the end of book 8. So I do love how Gabaldon brings the 2 times together. So Brianna and Roger have brought books with them. So they've brought Dr. Seuss and The Hobbit. There's talk about privies and indoor bathrooms. So that's been an interesting part. And there are parts in this book, like an incident with a bear. And I would say the last 10 to 20 chapters, there's like 150 chapters in this book, but they pack a punch that leaves you in a good place for what's, hopefully to come in the 10th and final book. So I felt like a lot of that was what is happening in this book. It was setting everything up for what is to come. So now I'm waiting, hopefully not another 7 years, for the final book. If you are reading the series and you are an Outlander fan, then this is definitely worth the read. Okay, moving on to the 5th book. It begins like this. Shakespeare calls memory the warder of the brain, and despite the fact that it is Lady Macbeth who brings up this idea, while bulldozing her husband into murdering their current house guest, I find it very comforting. And this comes from the memoir Baggage by Alan Cumming. I read Alan Cumming's other memoir last year and I loved it. You don't need to have read that memoir in order to read this one. But obviously, because they are about the same person, they are interlinked. Like the other memoir, there are a few chuckles along the way. I like how he phrases some things. This memoir focuses on Alan's life between 2 marriages, and it is much more about his career and show business. And I enjoyed how he gave the differences in culture and approaches to acting between the US and Europe. It's an interesting cultural shock that I hadn't really given much thought to before reading this. Alan Cumming also talks about his mental health in this one. And I loved his first memoir because it didn't feel to me like a celebrity memoir. This one feels more like a celebrity memoir. But, I mean, I enjoyed it because I really like Alan Cumming. And I guess if you are a celebrity, the only kind of memoir that you really can write is a celebrity memoir. So this is a good one to pick up if you are an Alan Cumming fan. Yeah, I would say try it out. Up next, this book begins. Tom glanced behind him and saw the man coming out of the green cage, heading his way. And this is from The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith, which I read for the Killer Reads group that AJ Dunn is hosting. I really enjoyed this book, and I really enjoyed the group conversation. I will leave a link to AJ's channel in the description box below. You are welcome to join the group on any of the reads that you are interested in. So from the beginning, well actually from that first line, you are in the middle of Tom Ripley's paranoia. Tom Ripley is a con man, he's a sociopath, and it's amazing how he does what he does. The story begins in the 1950s in Manhattan when Mr. Greenleaf, who is a very successful and rich man, asks Tom to go to Italy and persuade his son Dickie to return home. All expenses paid. Tom takes him up on this offer, and although Dickie is really only an acquaintance to Tom, Tom becomes obsessed with him and being his friend. And there's a lot in this book that is not explicit with regard to the relationships between Tom and Dickie and his sort of maybe girlfriend Marge. And what intrigued me the most is how things were left vague or obscure, just enough to add layers to who these characters are, especially Tom. The fact that Tom looks a bit like Dickie and has the ability to mimic or imitate people and their mannerisms, their voice, it only helps to enable him to pull off the reality that he creates for himself. And the book kept me wanting to find out more. So I do think that I will eventually read more from this series. So if you like characters, like AJ mentioned, Joe Goldberg from the series You, or Frank Abagnale from Catch Me If You Can, then I think that you will most likely enjoy Tom Ripley. Up next, this book is my February book club, and it starts like this. The enigma arrived in the afternoon post, sealed, smudged, and devastating. This is from The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. Kate Quinn writes historical fiction with female lead characters, and this one takes place during the 1940s. It has two timelines, the first in 1940 leading up to World War II, and the second in 1947 after the war and leading up to the royal wedding of Queen Elizabeth to Prince Philip. The story alternates between these two times, and it focuses on three women who end up working at Bletchley Park as code breakers, breaking German military codes. All three women are inspired by real women in history, which I think is, pretty cool. The first is Osla, who is Prince Philip's girlfriend, and her knowledge of German is beneficial when she is recruited to Bletchley Park. Mab is her roommate at the home that they are being billeted in, and that is how the two of them meet Beth. And Beth's mother has these women living in her home, and she treats Beth almost like a servant. And Beth seems very sheltered, and yet she is very intelligent and especially good at crossword puzzles. So the other two women get her a job at Bletchley Park as well. Skipping ahead to 1947, the women have had some sort of falling out, but we don't know, what happened. We know that Beth is now in an asylum, and Mab and Osla receive a cryptic note asking for their help, which forces the three women together again to face their past. So there's a lot that I like about this story, but it did fall short for me. I liked the two timelines, I liked the time period, the setting, I liked the three women. I like that at the end, in the author's note, there's an explanation about the real life people that inspired the story. I also like that the book is floppy, and it has deckled edges, and it has French flaps. So I like all of that. But where I thought it fell short was with the friendships between the three women. I thought that it could have been developed a lot more. It seemed as though that they were just colleagues to me, and I think had their friendship been more developed, then the conflict and the reason for their falling out would have had more of an impact. There were times in the book that I kind of lost focus, and then I would be, brought back by something in the story. So this book is for anyone who likes books written in the 1940s, that take place in the 1940s, books with strong female characters, and if you are interested in Bletchley Park, then this is definitely for you. Okay, so there's a few more here to go. The next book starts. It is a long way in time and space from the bathroom of my grandmother Mowat's house in Oakville, Ontario, to the bottom of a wolf den in the barren lands of central Keewatin. and I have no intention of retracing the entire road which lies between. This is from Never Cry Wolf by Farley Mowat, which I did an entire video on because it was part of my Margaret Made Me Read It series. But I will say that Farley Mowat does not retrace most of the road that lies between his grandmother's house and Keewatin. This is a true Canadian classic, and in the video that I did about it, I talk about some of the controversy and criticism that came along with the book. I will leave a link to the video so you can check that out if that is something that you are interested in. The next book is another big one, and this begins When I was a girl, I'd sit in my elementary school classroom in Long Beach, California, staring at the big pulled-down map of the world and daydream about the places I'd go. And this is the first line from the autobiography All In by Billie Jean King. This took me a while to finish because I set it aside and I read a whole bunch of other books before coming back to it. But that's not because it's not the book's fault. That's because of me. That's my fault. I have to admit that I didn't know a lot about Billie Jean King before reading this, except I had heard her name that was familiar to me. And although I probably couldn't tell you exactly who she was, I wouldn't have been surprised, if you had said, oh, she's a famous tennis player. But really, that was the extent of it. I am not a tennis fan or even really a sports fan, but I was interested in reading this book in particular to find out more about who Billie Jean King is and how she influenced sports. So Billie Jean King did not let me down. If you like tennis and you like sports, then this book is for you too. But what I found the most fascinating was finding out who Billie Jean King is and the many barriers that she had to, overcome and break down because she was a woman in sports and she was good at sports. And the work that she's done for equity and inclusion for all sports is amazing. And this memoir really brings to the forefront how prejudiced and racist and sexist sports have been and can be. And I thought how she intertwined her activism work with her personal story was very well done. She shares about her marriage, her struggles with an eating disorder, her sexual identity, the press, and how her infamous game against Robbie Riggs was. So this book is for anyone who enjoys a sports autobiography, but also anyone who is interested in activism for equal rights. The first line of this next book is, I am standing just close enough to Mummy until she begins to speak to me. And this is in Scarborough by Hernandez. This is the only book that I had to read for the Canada Reads shortlist, and I read it just before the list came out, before it was announced. And I feel bad because this book sat on my shelf for way too long. It is so good. The book takes place over 1 year. There are 4 parts, one for each season. And the structure of the book is so unique. It is told in alternating perspectives of several of the kids who are part of a literacy program that runs out of a local public school and the main adults in their lives. And then there are also memos, emails, and daily reports between Hina, who is the social worker at this program, and her supervisor, who I did not like, and the parents. And they are all very telling. The characters come from all different cultures and backgrounds. So there are Indigenous, Filipino, Vietnamese, Islam, Black people. Some of them are living with domestic violence. Others are living in shelters. Their daily lives are navigating drugs and gambling and hunger. And it's an incredible spotlight on a community that is just trying to survive. And it is told in such a powerful way. I thought that this was such an excellent book, and I'm hoping to read Catherine Hernandez's book Crosshairs soon. So this is a book for anyone who is interested in social justice, and if you like character-driven novels as well. And then the final book, I am sad to say that I can't find it. I don't know where I put it, and I know that when I'm done filming this and I've posted it, I will look someplace randomly and there it will be, because that happens every time. So I can't tell you the first line of this book, so I do apologize, but once I find the book, I will put the first line in the description box below so you can check that out. The final book is Undercover, Bromance by Lyssa K. Adams, and this is the second book in the Bromance book club series. I had read the first book last year when I said that I was going to read more romance books, and so I thought I'll give this one a try and see how the second one goes. And I liked this one, but not as much as the first one. I think that it lost some of its shine to me. The first book sets this book up a bit in that, you know, we already know that there's a group of men who have started a book club to read romance novels, and that they use it and each other's support in their own love lives, especially when that's not going very well. The first book was about Gavin and Thea, and this book focuses on Mac and Thea's sister Liv. So that's the focus of the love story. The other storyline is that Liv is a pastry chef, and the owner is sexually harassing the women at work. And Liv turns to Mac for some help in taking this celebrity chef down. And then, of course, Mac turns to the Bromance book club guys. So it was okay. Like the first book, it has some great one-liners and laugh-out-loud moments. But for me, it just didn't have the same appeal as the first one did. There are, I think, 2 more books in this series, and I might actually even own them, so I may eventually read those, but for now they are not high on the list at this point. So this is a good book for anyone who likes rom-coms, and if you enjoyed the first book in this series, then definitely keep reading, you know. So that is all of the books that I read in January. That's my wrap up. It was a pretty good reading month, a few chunky books in there. So please let me know if you have read any of these. What are your thoughts? Are you interested in reading any of these if you haven't yet? What are the books that you read in January that you think I might need to check out or that you think I would like? I'd love to hear about that as well. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.